Hey there, this is Katie from Katie and the Squid. In this video, I'm going to show you how to improvise a crocheted hat. If you like things all yarn and crochet related, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I share all kinds of crochet tutorials as well as product reviews related to crochet. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I like to improvise my crocheted hats. This is a great technique because it doesn't require a pattern. It doesn't require a gauge swatch, and in most cases it doesn't require any kind of math or anything like that. If you're the kind of person who you need a pattern, you need a stitch count, you need step-by-step instructions, and you're really strict about following them, this might not be the technique for you. But if you're someone who is maybe new to crochet and you don't really know how to follow a pattern yet, but you really want to make something, this is a great technique for you. Or maybe you're a little more advanced in your crocheted skills and you are feeling a little creative. This would be a great thing for you to try. Or maybe you have a specific yarn or a specific stitch pattern or texture that you'd like, but you can't quite find the perfect pattern for your yarn or your idea. This is a great little technique to have in your back pocket. So in the video, I make this hat, and I'll warn you when I'm almost done with the hat, my camera that I normally use, the battery decided to die, and for some reason it's not charging right, so I think I need to order a new one. Instead of waiting for a new battery to come, I decided to finish the tutorial on my phone, and that's what I'm using right now. So if the video and the audio changes a little, that's just what's going on there. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to those other clips and we'll get started. For this project, you will need a skein of yarn. It could really be any skein of yarn. I've used this technique with a lot of worsted weight yarn, DK weight yarn. Just make sure you have about 100 grams. It should be plenty. So this is Cotton Top from King Cole, and it's a DK weight. And then you will need a hook that is the appropriate size for your yarn. This yarn suggests a 4mm. But I went ahead and got an H, which is a 5mm. Anything that is within the range that's appropriate for your yarn should work just fine. And this hook I am working on a review on, so be sure to stick around to check that out, and when it's up I will link to that in this video. I will also leave a link to where you can find a stockist for King Cole, so you can find this yarn if you'd like. So you will also need the person that you're making the hat for, or your own head if it's for yourself. If that person isn't available, or you're making it as a gift, or maybe you want to sell your hat, you can use a tape measure with some standard head sizes. I will either link to some head sizes, like standard head sizes, or I'll just put them in the description of this video. And you'll need a tape measure for that. But if you're making this for yourself, you don't need a tape measure, you just need your head. So here are two examples that I use this technique for. This is, I used worsted weight yarn. This is another King Cole yarn. I believe it's called Fashion. I will link to that yarn in the description. So this is a worsted weight yarn, and I made this for myself. This is another example. It was a prototype of a design that I was working on, and as you can see, I made the brim longer so that it could be folded over, and then I used a little bit of a fancier stitch into the hat itself, and then I did some striping. So basically with this technique, we're going to start with the brim, and then you'll work the hat from the bottom up. So for the brim stitch, I always use the same stitch. I use single crochets, and then I work them into the back loop to create the ribbing. And then for the hat, the body of the hat, I use a variety of stitches. This is half double crochet, which is what I'll do in the video, but I mean, really you could do anything. You could do single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet. You could really do anything. You could do a combination of stitches, which might be a little bit more advanced. But I will just give you the idea, and you can kind of just make up whatever you want. So to begin, we're going to chain the length of that you want your brim to be. So whatever length you want this to be, that's how long you want your chain. This one is probably about 2 inches, 2.5 inches. And then this one that is folded over is about a little bit over the 4 inches. So whatever length you want, that's how long you want to make your chain. So I'm gonna go for about 2 inches, and really you don't need to use a ruler, you could just eyeball this. So I'm just going to chain, and the number doesn't matter, just that it is the length that you want. So I'll just check that. It's a little over 2 inches, but I'm just gonna go with that. So to start row 1, you are going to single crochet into the second chain from your hook, and then you'll single crochet all the way across. To start row 2, you're going to chain 1 and turn, and then you're going to work a row of single crochets worked into the back loops of the previous row. So if you're not familiar with working into the back loop, you can look at your stitch here. This loop here is the front loop, and then this loop back here is the back loop. So you want to make sure that you're putting your hook into that back loop. If you'd like, you could start and stop the row working into both loops, but I just work into the back loop all the way across. Some people like to start and stop the row working into back loops because it might look neater, but I just work into the back loops all the way across. So again, here is our front loop here, and then the back loop is back here, and you just need to make sure that your hook goes into that back loop. So by working into the back loop, we are creating a nice ribbing, and it'll be nice and stretchy, and it's great for the bottom of hats. And that's what it looks like after row 2. For the rest of the brim, you will repeat row 2 until your brim is as long as it needs to be. I will come back when my brim is the length that it needs to be, and I'll explain how you check to make sure that it's the right size. One little tip I forgot when I started my brim is that you should probably count the number of stitches you have when you start, just so you can periodically count to make sure you didn't accidentally skip a stitch or add a stitch somewhere. I finished my brim, and the trick is you want to make it smaller than you actually think it should be. So I've decided that I'm going to go ahead and make this for my niece because I haven't made her a hat in a while. And if you're making it for yourself, you should take the brim and stretch it around your head, and when you should completely stretch it out, and when it is long enough that the ends just barely meet when it's stretched around your head, then it's the perfect size. You should almost be questioning whether it's too small. And the reason is because after the hat's been worn for a while, it's going to stretch out, so it should feel pretty snug at first, but it will loosen up over time. So if you're making it for your own head, you can try it on your head to make sure that it's the right size, or if the person that you're making it for is available, you can try it on their head. But since my niece isn't here, I'm just gonna go off of standard head sizing, hat sizing. I probably could ask my sister to measure her head, but I'm just gonna go off of standard sizes. You could get the measurement of the actual person if you'd like as well. So she is 3, so I'm going to use a child size instead of a toddler size because I want to make sure that it fits for a while, which is child would be 19 to 22 inches. So I made it 22, or I'm sorry, I made it 19 inches. So, and again, the brim is not actually 19 inches. It's going to be quite a bit smaller than that. And so the way I do it is I'll hold my tape measure on one end and then I will completely stretch it out and make sure that it reaches 19 inches. Again, it's gonna feel like it's super small, but trust me, it'll be better in the long run because it's gonna stretch out, and you don't want a hat to be all stretched out and loose after a while, if you know what I mean. It's not gonna look nice. So once your brim is the right size, you're going to fold this in half and join your last row to your beginning chain to make the brim. So again, just here is my example. The brim will look like this and it'll be all joined together. So to do that, I'm going to work a row of slip stitches, and so these slip stitches will be on the inside of your hat. So I just slip stitch the first row to the last row, and I actually like to take the first row and bring it behind, and then I will work into the back loop and then the back loop of my chain. So I will just slip stitch these together. And that is the completed brim. So again, this is going to be the inside of the hat, so I'm going to go ahead and flip that to the inside. And now I'm going to start the body of the hat. So this is where it gets kind of fun. You can have a lot of fun choosing whatever stitches you want. I'm going to do half double crochet just to make it easy. So this one, you can see I just worked my half double crochet into the side of the brim. And then this other example I have here, so the first row I did a single crochet, and then these other stitches are just shell stitches. And I mean, you could do pretty much any stitch you want. You could do single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet. You could do any kind of combination of stitches. Really just have fun with it. And you can experiment and do different things. So for row 1, working into the sides of stitches, if that's new, I'm going to show you how to do it. It doesn't really matter where you stick your hook when you're working into the side of these stitches. The key is that you want to make sure that you do the same thing all the way around so that it looks consistent. So I'm just going to show you how I do it. If you do it a little bit differently, it's fine as long as you do the same thing all the way around. So I'm actually going to, since I'm doing half double crochet, the first stitch I'm going to do is actually a single crochet because I'm going to do continuous rounds, and I want to make sure that the step up is a little bit gradual so that I don't have a big gap right here. If you're doing double crochet or any stitch that's a little bit taller than the half double crochet, you might want to do a single crochet, half double crochet, and then a double crochet just to make that step up a little bit more gradual, and that'll make a little bit more sense when I start my second row. So for the first one, I'm going to go into the side of the first row of single crochet here. So that would actually be right here. So the first one I do single crochet. And then I'm going to, I went into this first row here. So my second row is right here. And I'm going to do a half double crochet. And I'm going to go right here. So again, it doesn't matter really where your hook is going. Just keep it consistent all the way across. So my next stitch, so I kind of use these front loops as a marker, a landmark to remember where I'm putting my stitches. So this one's going to go right before where that line is of the front loops, and then the next one will go right after it. So really just the key is to kind of find your own groove and find where you like to put your stitches. And you can stop and check just to make sure you like how it's looking. If you don't like it, you can rip it out and try again, but just keep it consistent all the way around. So I'm just going to continue this all the way around until I get back to where my first single crochet is. So I worked all the way around the sides of my brim, and I've come to my first stitch, which was that single crochet. So for your hat, I mean, you really could work, you can work continuous rounds, which is what I'm going to do here, or you could work joined rounds, which is what I did for this hat, just because it worked out better with the striping. It depends on whatever stitch you're working, so feel free to play around with it and use whatever works best for you. So to work continuous rounds, all I'm going to do is I'm going to half double crochet into that first single crochet. And this is why we did a single crochet instead of straight into the half double crochet, just to kind of minimize that gap there. If you'd like, when you weave in your end that's here, you can kind of close up that gap. Now I'm just going to continue to work half double crochet all the way around until my hat is just about the length that I need it to be. I'm not going to join. I'm not even going to mark my first stitch of my round because it really doesn't matter, just as long as you make it about as long as it needs to be. So I'm making a child size, which should be about 7.5 inches, but a little bit of extra length in hats doesn't really hurt too much, so I might go closer to maybe 8 inches. And you want to keep in mind that you're going to have a little bit of extra rows for your decreasing, but it's not a lot. So if you're trying this hat on yourself or somebody that you're making it for, you can try it on to see if it's just about tall enough. So for the decreasing on this hat, it only started right here. So I think it's only the last 2 rows that I did any decreasing. So the decreasing doesn't take up too much length of the hat. So if you're trying to decide when to stop. So again, try it on yourself, try it on the person you're making it for to see if it's long enough, or go based off of the measurements. So I'm gonna aim for 7.5, maybe a little bit over 7.5, just to make sure that it's a good size. So again, I'm just working continuous rounds until I feel the hat is tall enough. So I finished the length of my hat. It is close to 7.5 inches. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start decreasing for the top of the hat so that I can sew it closed. And you can see this is the decreasing on the other hat that I already did. So you have a few options to do your decreasing here. Basically what I want to do is I want to do a decrease on every stitch so that I am cutting the stitch count in half on every round. So I have a few options with the stitch that I'm using, and it really depends on whatever stitch you're using that you want to do. So you can either do a half double crochet 2 together, or whatever stitch you're doing 2 together. It's harder to do the stitch looking through my phone than it is looking at my actual stitches. So you can do a half double crochet and just repeat that all the way around. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip every other stitch. So I'll skip that stitch and work into the next one. Skip the next stitch and then work into the next stitch. And I am just going to do that all the way around, and I will repeat that until the top of my hat is small enough that I can sew it shut. So this is about a good place to stop. You can see the hole at the top is, I don't know, maybe like an inch in diameter. The amount of stitches is going to depend on the yarn you're using and maybe the stitch that you're using. But when it's like there's like an inch opening at the top, that's a good place to stop. So I'm going to show you how to close this up. I'm going to grab my scissors and I'm just going to fasten off, leaving a little bit of a tail. Then I'm going to grab a needle. To sew this up, I mean, you have a few options. You could go back and forth, but what I like to do, again, it's hard to look through my phone. I like to go through the stitches like this, and I guess this is a whip stitch is what you would call it. And I'll just go through every stitch at the top of the hat all the way around. And then when I get to the last stitch, I'll go through the first stitch again, and I will just pull that closed, and then you can tuck the end in and then sew it in, and that is the finished hat. So I think this would be super cute with a pom-pom on top. So I'll see if I have a pom-pom to put on it before I give this to my niece, but that is the basic technique. And like I said, you could get creative and use different stitches in the body of the hat, but it's probably good to try this technique with a simple stitch just to get the hang of it before you try something a little bit more complicated. So if you have any questions about this technique, feel free to put them in the comments and I will try and answer them as best as I can. Maybe there's something I left out that's a little confusing. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.